Hi guys, working on a Roadster today. I'm just about to drop the subframe off and I figured it would be an ideal opportunity to show you what is involved with that. There's a few jobs that require the subframe to be removed. So yeah, let's have a look what we've got. So the car is already jacked up and in the air. This is a job that a customer had already started and I'm now coming to finish, which is doing the clutch. I've been in a separate video, not from start to finish. But what I've done is, if you've got the headlight level sensor, you can either undo this one here or this one here on this little link arm. The reason I didn't undo the bottom one, it has this little metal bracket that's designed to hold the nut, the equivalent of that little nut edge there, so you can just undo the one side, but invariably these just fail. So this one has already been removed at some point to have this whole sensor changed, so I figured that was the easiest way on this one. I've removed the drop link from the top. You can do it from the top or the bottom, it makes no difference. Again, access wise, it's just easier for me to be able to get my gun in and buzz this off. Leave the nuts with everything that you've taken off, it just makes it easier. Then going underneath, I've undone the ball joint. Now there's a couple of ways of undoing the ball joint. You'll notice a load of paint under here. The reason I've done that is so that I know where those have got to go back, because you can see those elongated holes. So that's why I just paint mark that, so that we know where that's going back to. You can undo it from this nut at the top here. What you find when you do that is in the top of this nut here, there's a fixing for either an Allen or a Torx bit, depending on the style of the ball joint, that you hold that in place and then you undo this nut. What you usually find is that because it's a conical design inside the hub, that this shaft will stay in place for undoing, and then you'll get sort of, I don't know, a few turns away from the end, likes to tease you, and it will start spinning, and then the bit in the end won't hold it tight enough, so then you're having to cut it off. Or you get lucky, it comes all the way off on removal, and then when you're trying to do it back up, you can't, you can put a jack under this point here and force the cone through the tapered fitment, but that is prone to causing issues. So this way has less failure rate in my experience, but you can do it either way. So then we're going to have to remove these 4 bolts here, which go through into the steering rack. There is, we can just about see, it's not on this one, but just through that gap there, you can see that threaded fitment there that's on the anti-roll bar bracket. That's usually got a P-clip that sits around this power steering line and holds it in place to stop it moving. So that, you usually tend to undo that. The easiest way is, once the subframe is partially dropped, you can get to that a lot easier and just undo the 13mm nut that's on there. So I've loosened these off, so these have got to come off for the dog bone mount going into the gearbox. Again, you can either undo it here or you could undo it, the 2 here, but I find that it's just easier just to undo these 2. These never go wrong, whereas those 2 that go into the subframe, if you're not planning on changing the bush or anything, you've got no reason to take this off. I wouldn't risk it, because these bolts often suffer from dissimilar metal corrosion with the aluminium, and it creates a weird paste inside there and it ends up just snapping the bolt head off rather than the bolts coming out. So for that reason, I'll just be removing these. And then we've got, because it's a Roadster, this is how the Roadsters vary, and this is how they add stiffness to the chassis. This whole part here links the 2 halves of the chassis via the subframe. So triangulation, it just adds stiffness and rigidity to the chassis. So we've just got a couple of 13mm bolts that we'll undo from that end, leaving this end attached, and the same on the other side. When you're doing 3-inch downpipes, if that's the job that you've got at hand, what you'll find if you're doing it on a Roadster is that this part here, this part here will just need modifying slightly with an angle grinder, so that your 3-inch downpipe will clear past here. If you get just like the standard pipe works or something like that, It's either this side or this side, but you'll see when you fit it, when you offer it back up, you just need to sort of cut the corner away to allow the new downpipe to sit in place. What we've also got, it's more difficult to get to on the Roadster, but we've got to undo this mounting here. So this rubber mat here, we've got to either undo it off this part or off the top part. Now I've got a special pair of pliers for doing that, but it is more tricky on the Roadster because you've got this whole piece in the way. But yeah, you've got to get those off. And then once you've done all of that, so once you've got both wishbones undone, once you've got the steering rack removed from there and there, and there and there, once you've got these off, you can then tackle the main bolts here, which, there we go, I'm really struggling for space under here. So you've got this one here, which is the same the opposite side, and then you've got these two across the back there, which what I always recommend is crack them all off first, and then once they're all cracked off, you can lower it down. It'll get caught on this rubber mat if you've not already undone it, and it'll get caught with the way that the steering rack sits here. It sits under the anti-roll bar, which you can see just the edge of there, so it usually just catches on the foot of it, so it's not just going to drop completely away. But what I'd then do is put a trolley jack under sort of this point here, and you can just be in control of how much it lowers then. And then for refitting, refitting's dead easy if you have a trolley jack, which you should have. Just push it under the car on the trolley jack, and then offer it up slowly into position, you know, putting the steering rack underneath the anti-roll bar, putting the drop links back up in place and the ball joints in place before it's even anywhere near the chassis. It actually helps guide it into place as well. And then just make sure that the exhaust bracket for the mount sits the right side of the exhaust. You'll see what I mean. When it comes away, it has to sort of hook round and over the exhaust, and then drops down to support that exhaust hanger. And then yeah, just line everything up slowly, one at a time on the bolts. Get the bolts all in loosely, move the subframe, line it all up and do them up. So it's nice and easy, but I'm going to whip that off now. Nice and easy. There we go. So we've got 21mm 6-sided socket on a nice long bar. That is tight. Woo! Get a buzz gun. So once they're cracked off, nice and easy. But my goodness, they are tight. These bolts that I'm removing right now are one use. You can see how tight that was. That's because when you torque them up, you put a final stretch on them, so they shouldn't be reused. That's the size of the bolt we're dealing with there. So yeah, make sure you get some new ones. They're quite expensive. For the purposes of filming, I'm obviously not doing this quite the same way. I've undone all the bolts. You can see that part of the steering rack there would normally live under this part of the anti-roll bar. So you can see on this side here, it's still slightly, it's going to get caught by that. So as we wiggle the subframe, that'll come away. Now I've still got the exhaust hanger in place. So it's just, so as we drop it, it's got to come forwards and round. I don't know if you can quite tell that, but it's got to come a bit that way. like that. So when you're putting it back on, you'll put this back on and then make sure this comes forward as you jack it up. But like I said, because of those supports on the Roadster, I've got it to this position so that I can now get my tool on to be able to remove that without damaging this, because we don't have to replace it for no reason. So other than that, as you can tell now, once that is off, the subframe is not attached to anything else. So that's now the point where I'm going to put my trolley jack under there, just so it doesn't come crashing down. And then yeah, the subframe's off and it gives you much better access. So if you're doing 3-inch downpipe, gives you all the access you need. You drop the steering rack from inside the car, it comes down to about here. You can get the downpipe past, or if you're doing what we're doing today and doing gearbox off, it gives you room for everything to come out. These are only about a tenner for a pair of these pliers, and they just make this job so much easier. Like that. That's virtually all the way off now, so now we'd be able to just persuade it with a bit of wiggling. Usually wiggle it with the pliers still on, it just adds that pressure, but I cannot do that one-handed. But yeah, then it'd come away. And there you go, she's free. So yeah, like I say, hopefully that's been educational. Enjoy.